In all my years of studying the Bible, I've never come across a supposed contradiction quite like this one. Paul writes in Galatians, man is not justified by works of the law. Then James writes, by works a man is justified and not by faith alone. At first look, these two apostles seem to be teaching completely opposite doctrines. Paul says man is not justified by works. James says man is justified by works. These statements can't both be true in the same sense. So either we've uncovered the greatest contradiction in the Bible, or we've misunderstood one or even both of these passages. So, do James and Paul really contradict each other? In order to find out, we have to
pull up a verse.
A lot of talk and a lot of word. Around here we put the scripture first.
Pull up a verse.
Yeah, is it a truth or lie? Give me the text, let the word decide.
Pull up a verse.
And I don't need no fancy speech. Just give me a verse the Bible teach. We just read.
So buckle up, cause we're going deep. The word alive, the message speaks.
Pull up a verse.
Now, most alleged contradictions don't impact core doctrine. Was King Uzziah 42 or 22? Was there one angel or multiple angels at the tomb? Whether those objections have answers or not, and they do, they don't affect the core teaching of the gospel. But this one is different. This isn't just a miscalculation on a number or a mishistorical fact. This is about salvation itself, answering the greatest question: how can a sinful person be made right in the eyes of a perfect God? If Paul says that we are justified by faith apart from works, and James says that we are justified by works, then that is two completely different ways of becoming saved. They cannot both be true in the same sense. If Paul is right, anyone trusting in their works are trusting in a false hope. And if James is right, teaching that works justify us before God, then Paul is completely wrong. And according to Paul himself, there can't be two gospels. Remember, Paul himself said, if anyone, whether it be myself or an angel from heaven, teaches another gospel, let that person be accursed. So this isn't a contradiction we can just simply shrug off. If Paul and James truly disagree, then one is teaching a false gospel. And if that's true, we can't just look at these passages as something hard to understand. We must come to a conclusion, or Christianity will crumble under the weight of this contradiction. So how do we solve it? Well, the answer begins with a single Greek word. Now, normally when we come across something like this, the first thing we would do is just look at the original Greek. If Paul uses one Greek word that is translated as justified, and James uses a separate Greek word that is translated as justified, then the solution is simple. Study the meaning of each word to understand what the author intended to say. But that's not what we find here, because both Paul and James use the exact same Greek verb. And here I go again, butchering Greek for your entertainment, dikaioō. In both passages where they say justified, it used the Greek verb dikaioō. Now, at first glance, that may seem to make the contradiction even worse. But just because two authors use the same word does not mean they're using it in the same sense. Think about the English word right. It can be used to say, I turn right at the corner, or you're right as in you're correct, or you are my right-hand man. That's one word with three completely different meanings. Greek works the same way. The verb dikaioō has what scholars call semantic range, meaning it can legitimately carry more than one meaning depending on the context. For example, it carries two meanings. One, to declare someone righteous, or two, to vindicate or prove something to be right. Now, those meanings are closely related, but they are not identical. So before we can accuse Paul and James of contradicting each other, we have to answer one critical question. In which sense is each author using dikaioō? Let's let the scriptures answer that. First, let's take a look at Paul. In Galatians, Paul is addressing salvation. He's answering one question. How does a sinful person become righteous in the eyes of a perfect and holy God? He covers, can we earn God's acceptance? Can keeping the law save us? Can circumcision save us? Can religious work save us? And Paul answers that with an emphatic no. Now, before I tell you what Paul means when he says justify, let's take a look at one of the most respected Greek lexicons. This is BDAG, a Greek English lexicon of the New Testament. Notice what it says here. Speaking of dikaioō, it says Paul uses the word almost exclusively of God's judgment. Then it defines Paul's use of the word dikaioō as acquitted, to be pronounced or treated as righteous. Let's take a look at how Paul uses it in Romans chapter 4, verse 5. God justifies the ungodly. Again, using dikaioō, that is to say, God pronounces righteous the ungodly. Notice something, God doesn't justify people because they've already become righteous. He justifies the ungodly. If God declares someone righteous while they're still considered ungodly, then that declaration cannot be based on their works. An ungodly person has not earned a righteous verdict. Paul says that God declares a person righteous not because of their works, but because of Christ. Now let's go back to Paul's verse in Galatians. It says, knowing that a man is not justified, declared righteous by the works of the law, but by faith of Jesus Christ. Paul's entire point is that no one can earn the declaration of being called righteous. It is received through faith. Now let's go back to James. He uses the exact same Greek word, but remember, words can have different meanings based upon the context. Notice BDAG gives an alternative meaning for the word dikaioō, and that is to render a favorable verdict, vindicate. Now that's not a phrase that we use every day, so let me put it in a way that we can understand. It means to prove something to be true, or to show that something really is what it claims to be. Now listen to James again with that meaning in mind. You see then how by works a man is justified and not by faith only. Or to put it another way, you see then how by works a person's claim to have faith is shown to be genuine and not by faith that stands alone. Now, before you go off thinking that I changed what James said, let's see how Jesus used the same Greek word. Matthew chapter 11, verse 19, Jesus says that wisdom is justified by her works. Now, obviously, Jesus is not teaching that wisdom gets saved by her works. He's saying that wisdom is proven to be wisdom by what it produces. Its results demonstrate that it's true. If wisdom can be justified in the sense of being proven by its works, then James's point becomes much more clearer. He's not explaining how a person becomes saved. He's explaining how a person's profession of faith is proven to be genuine. Let's look at the context. Before James says that a person is justified by their works, he starts off by saying, what does it profit, my brethren, though a man says he has faith? There is a key phrase, says he has faith. James isn't talking about how does someone get saved. James is confronting someone who claims to have faith. He's attacking a verbal confession that is never followed up with any fruit. He continues to give illustration after illustration. He says, if a brother or sister is hungry and someone says to them, go in peace and be filled and be warm, but gives them nothing, what good is that? What does it profit that person? Then he concludes that faith, if it doesn't have works, is dead. Notice what James never says. He never says that works create faith. He never says that works earn salvation. He never says that God declares us righteous because of our works. His point is much simpler. Real faith proves itself. It demonstrates itself. It vindicates itself. Just like Jesus said that wisdom is proven by what it produces, James is saying that genuine faith is proven by what it produces. So again, Paul is answering how does someone become righteous before God, where James is saying how is a person's claim of faith proven to be genuine? Different question, different context, same word. And here's something I find very interesting. Both James and Paul both use Abraham to drive home their point, but they mention two very different moments in Abraham's life. Paul, while explaining how does a person become right with God, quotes Genesis 15. Abraham believed God and it was counted to him as righteousness. Now this happened early on for Abraham, before circumcision, before the law, before Isaac. What is Paul's point? Faith alone. Now, much later in Abraham's life, he goes to offer Isaac as a sacrifice. And this is the point that James points out. James points to this to show Abraham's faith was shown to be genuine. His faith was on full display. It wasn't created during this task. It wasn't earned during this task. It was on display. It was demonstrated while doing this. His obedience proved the faith that he already had. And Jesus taught the exact same principle. In Matthew chapter 7, he says, you will know them by their fruit. Notice, not by their claims or by finding them in the synagogue. not even by what they call themselves, but by their fruit. In John 15, Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. Now what happens to a branch connected to the vine? It naturally bears fruit. And any branch that bears no fruit, it is cut off from the vine. Jesus' point is exactly James' point. Living faith produces visible fruit, not because fruit save you, but because living things produce life. So is there a contradiction? Not at all. Paul is answering, how does a sinner become righteous before a holy and perfect God? And the answer is simple, by faith, apart from the works of the law. James is answering, how does someone who claims to have faith show their faith to be genuine? And his answer, by the works the faith produces. Paul is fighting legalism. James is fighting dead faith. Paul opposes earning salvation, while James opposes claiming salvation without the evidence of transformation. Different question, different audiences, the same word used. It's not a contradiction. They give us one complete picture of the gospel. Because once you realize that Paul is talking about the root of salvation and James is talking about the fruit of salvation, the contradiction completely disappears. So next time someone tells you that Paul and James are contradicting each other, you can ask them, are they even answering the same question? And then take them on the journey of explaining the gospel to them in a more full and complete picture. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please do not forget to like, share, and comment, and I will see you in the next one.